Hello financial enthusiasts, welcome to the show, and click the like button. It really helps with the Google algorithm. Today we're going to be talking about the recent Bitcoin crash, and everybody wanted to get out of Bitcoin all at one time, and anytime that happens you cause a stampede, you cause a crash, because the fact is markets are not able to really handle everybody selling all at once. When everybody sells all at once, there really is not, it's not capable, the system is not capable of handling vast numbers of people who want to sell all at the same time. But I think what's the important question is, what is Bitcoin really worth? Because anytime there's a crash, you kind of think, well, if everybody wants to sell this, why do I want to keep it? What is the intrinsic value of Bitcoin really? And the intrinsic value of Bitcoin is the fact that it's not something you cannot increase the value of. You cannot increase the supply of Bitcoin just like with a push of a button. In fact, I think the supply is about 2% a year. So that means the whole question of Bitcoin really has a lot to do with just how much demand there is, because the supply is pretty much restricted to 2%, which actually even goes lower over the long run. So the supply issue, that's fixed. The demand issue is not. Now, what I think is important is there's this model to determine the value of Bitcoin. It's called the stock to flow model, and it's actually a pretty interesting model because it actually tries to model the value of Bitcoin in a similar fashion to other commodities like corn, coffee, things of that sort, because commodities in general they have a similar issue of just a limited supply. There's definitely a limited supply of coffee, of corn, and things of that sort. But the same is actually true of Bitcoin. So what this basically means is that this model tries to look at how much supply, how much Bitcoin is there in circulation, and how long would it take to actually increase the level of Bitcoin at the present time. And so this model is actually able to come up with an analysis. It's like actually more like a mathematical formula, but it's actually able to provide a very unique answer in terms of what is pretty much the idea of what Bitcoin is really inherently worth, because Bitcoin doesn't have cash flows. It just doesn't have the normal metrics that most companies have. So with this kind of model, let me put this. I'm gonna put my filter back on. So basically, this model finds and is one way of trying to come up with an answer as to what Bitcoin is worth. And based on what I've seen on this model, it suggests that the Bitcoin is really worth about $55,000 at the present time. Now, what's interesting about this is that the analysis of this actually is that Bitcoin will be worth even double that, around more than 100,000 Bitcoin around later in the year, and about $1 million by 2024. And a lot of that is due to the issue of the halving will be taking place by 2024, which means that mining Bitcoin will be a lot more difficult at that point in time, and that's really going to be something that actually continues to make Bitcoin rise in value. Now, I think it's important to note that when Bitcoin is crashing, people really focus a lot on the negative headlines that exist, and then they say, oh, that's the reason why Bitcoin crashed. It was the Elon Musk tweets, and then the China banning Bitcoin, things of that sort. But here's the thing that's important to keep in mind, is that there are a lot of these negative news stories when Bitcoin is going up too. So that tells you one thing: these stories are really an excuse for Bitcoin to go down. They really are not the real answer in terms of why things are acting the way that they are. It's really just an excuse, because you're going to see plenty of bad stories during the bull market in Bitcoin, and they won't have much of an impact. Now, in in good times, you'll know that it's a good time when the price of Bitcoin will be going up despite the negative news. That will just show that just the environment you're in is a very bullish one. Now, it could be that the reason for Bitcoin declining had a lot to do with things that are not related at all to the things that you're being told is going down. So even though I say that the inherent value is around 55,000, maybe these are the factors that actually caused Bitcoin to at least temporarily go down. Maybe it has to do with proposed tax changes. People are saying, hey, I want to sell before that takes place. Secondly, there's always a fear that the Federal Reserve will actually possibly increase the value of the dollar by raising interest rates. And if the dollar goes up, supposedly Bitcoin's value will decline. And at least on a short-term basis, I think there's some element of that. I think a lot of people have been buying Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation. I know that I have had a view, and I think a lot of the Bitcoin enthusiasts just have lost a lot of trust in the US dollar and think that it's a great alternative. Third, it's almost like people forgot why Bitcoin has value in the first place when it goes down. And a lot of people are they're scared that it's going to go to zero value on the decline. And I think that's reasonable, because I mean, it's a reasonable concern about any investment, because you don't want your investment to go down to zero. And I think this is part of it. This is because people almost think of it as possibly like a penny stock that could go to zero. I mean, Timothy Skykes talks all about buying these kind of cheap stocks, writing it up, and then sell before it collapses to nothing. But actually, the inherent value and the idea of Bitcoin has not changed even a little bit because of the decline. In fact, here's the great thing: every substantial decline in Bitcoin has presented a really great buying opportunity in the past for people to buy at a lower price point, because it actually has always roared back higher and higher. So currently, for the people who are saying, hey, it's a Ponzi scheme and this is the proof that it's a Ponzi scheme, well, but here's the thing: the Ponzi schemes that have existed in the past, when it declined and it never came back. Enron, as example, never came back. Went completely bust, and no one ever heard from them again. Same for Bernie Madoff's fund. It collapsed in value, and people lost a lot. I mean, there was a recovery process, but other than that, I'm talking about the real scams out there. It really goes to zero. Bitcoin has not gone to zero. Now, I think it has gone down 90% at times, but I think a lot of that really had to do with the fact is that so few people owned Bitcoin that you could get one giant seller who was really just determined to sell, and that would of course push the price down pretty dramatically. Whereas today, as Bitcoin is getting into more and more hands, it actually means that the price declines should become a little bit less severe in the future, which I think is a positive. Secondly, I honestly think that major companies are going to be buying Bitcoin possibly on the dip very, very quietly. They will of course announce this later on, but they will be possibly buying on this dip, and that's another reason why Bitcoin may actually have a more robust move upward than in the past as well, especially because, as I point out, the stock to flow model suggests Bitcoin is at 55,000 based upon the 353-day average. And so that's my analysis of Bitcoin. I am still bullish on Bitcoin despite the short-term move down. Let's see what Danny thinks.
It's good to be a hodler, because this is very typical. We can keep walking.
Oh, okay.
This is very typical to have these declines. People have thought that Bitcoin has been left for dead. Many times it's had 50% declines and even 89% declines before. And this came suspiciously just after Musk tweeted that they weren't going to accept any more payments. So it obviously had a lot of people get panicky. And then it had a humongous rally off the lows from 30 to 41 so far. So we'll see what happens. But I think in the long term, if you didn't sell, you're gonna be pretty good. That's my view.
Also, it's not apparent that Elon Musk sold even one. It's not apparent that he sold even one car with the price of Bitcoin. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. Just because someone said that they were going to be allowing payment in Bitcoin doesn't mean that people actually chose to pay in Bitcoin. A lot of people actually, when they buy Bitcoin, they never want to sell it. Which actually, I know on one channel, there's one guy, he only uses Bitcoin Cash as his method of payment, and then of course he has to actually spend it. And people said, why would you spend your Bitcoin Cash? Because this is an asset class that always goes up. But then he pointed out, well, I don't own any paper or fiat currency, so of course I have to spend my Bitcoin because I don't have anything else. It's not like I have my paper currency to spend it on. That's actually a very interesting analysis. I think his view is he's kind of pushing the boundaries further by just giving up on the fiat currency model and going straight to Bitcoin Cash. Now, I don't really know many people using Bitcoin Cash. I actually do own some Bitcoin Cash, but I actually don't use it for anything. I've been a holder of that. Anyway, please subscribe. Like this video, really helps with the Google algorithm, and I'll see you in the next video, hopefully under better circumstances.